Hello everybody, this is Stardust Express, Angelika Simpson. My show is about truth issues, mysteries, metaphysics, spirituality, health, sacred sites. In my show tonight, I cannot continue my introduction about all the latest developments in finding out the origin of Atlantis. I couldn't find any more information about this, so I keep looking and I will put it on my show as soon as I find something. So for tonight's show, I have got interesting videos about Egypt, one about Peru, and the last one I'm presenting tonight is more of a scientific-based information about how old is the Earth and its species. I found this very, very interesting and very informative. So with my first video tonight, it talks about the new tablets discovered in Aswan in Egypt, and they reveal some insight into the early reign of the great leader of Egypt, Seti I, whose son has been Ramesses II. Enjoy this video.
We strive for understanding of the lost civilization and indeed who they were, where they came from, and what the hell happened to them. The ancient Egyptians that we speak about are the dynastic Egyptians, and they superseded a much earlier civilization. We know this through the dating of the structures in Egypt are far older than the hieroglyphics that are engraved upon such things. If you consider hieroglyphics as the written word of a civilization that survived the flood and found these pyramids and temples as they were, then you must also consider that there must be evidence somewhere of this earlier civilization, right? As we move forward in our understanding of these ancient enigmas, we will from time to time come across evidence that is hard to ignore, such as the stone boxes of Elephantine Island. When we look at this place, we see destruction. We also see things that were once precisely cut objects. What they were for is unknown, but it is examples like this and the boxes at the Serapeum of Saqqara, to name a few, that must have a purpose. When we realize what the purpose of such things were, then we will begin to understand much clearly of the pre-flood empire. Anywho, some fresh info for you to digest today regarding Seti I. Wait till you hear this. It's probably notable to mention in modern times that we say Seti. Most of us immediately think of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, but of course there was once a warrior king of Egypt who is not regarded much in the history books, so we are going to enlighten you somewhat in this video. In the early years of his reign, Seti led his army northward to restore Egyptian prestige, which had been partly lost during the troubled years of the late 18th dynasty. He battled in northern Palestine and Syria and fought at least one battle with the Hittite king Muwaltalis. He subsequently concluded a peace treaty that may have established the frontier at Kadesh on the Orontes River between the Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon mountains. Seti did much to promote the prosperity of Egypt. He fortified the frontier, opened mines and quarries, dug wells, and rebuilt temples and shrines that had fallen into decay or been damaged, and he continued the work begun by his father on the construction of the great Hypostyle Hall, which is one of the most impressive monuments of Egyptian architecture. Another important work is his memorial temple at Abydos, which he dedicated to Osiris and 6 other deities, and decorated with reliefs of great delicacy, on which much of the original colors remains. Behind this temple is a curious building dedicated to Osiris. Seti's tomb is the first in the Valley of the Kings in western Thebes. Although his son Ramses II is more famous, Seti is thought by many scholars to have been the greatest king of the 19th dynasty. If you consider the scale of restoration he ordered during his reign, then it is possible that Seti saved many pre-dynastic structures of this region from being lost to history completely. Newly discovered inscriptions of this pharaoh have been uncovered, and it sheds some more light on this part of dynastic Egyptian history. The inscriptions have both drawings and hieroglyphics on them, and one of the inscriptions mentions an elite general in King Tut's army. Archaeologists with the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities discovered the inscriptions while conducting a groundwater lowering project in Aswan. They found them inside Kam Ambo, a temple dedicated to the god Horus, and a crocodile-headed god named Sobek. The temple dates back 3,300 years, and the inscriptions may have originally been in an earlier temple, now lost, at Kam Ambo, that was located on the same spot as the later temple. This is an exciting discovery and is historically important to this period in history. One of the inscriptions, which still has yellow paint on it despite the passage of 3,300 years of time, shows Seti I with images of the king worshiping Sobek and Horus, and it appears to date to early in Seti I's reign. This inscription proves that the double cult of these two gods, Horus and Sobek, was already established at Kam Ambo in the 19th dynasty of the New Kingdom period, more than 1,000 years before the later temple was built. Another much larger inscription also appears to be in the name of Seti I and has an image that appears to show the king worshiping Horus and Sobek. This one is even more important historically. Archaeologists can't tell from the inscriptions precisely what the larger inscription says, but this was a major royal inscription and likely contained some kind of royal decree about the king's activities in the region. Perhaps a dedication to the temple of Horus and Sobek at Kam Ambo. It would be wonderful if the text of the larger inscription contains a report of the king's military activity. Seti came from a family of military generals, and after he became pharaoh, he launched military campaigns to conquer Libya, Canaan, Syria, and Nubia. The largest inscription mentions Horemheb, who was pharaoh until around 1293 BC, according to the statement. Aidan Dodson, an Egyptologist professor at the University of Bristol, could see at least one mention of Horemheb in the inscription. Horemheb was in fact the highest general in King Tut's army during Tut's reign. He became king by marrying into the royal family, and being head of the army probably also didn't hurt his chances of becoming pharaoh either. Why exactly Horemheb is mentioned in an inscription written in the name of Seti I is unclear. The inscription may be about completing some kind of building work begun by Horemheb and left unfinished at his death. We will leave it there for now, guys. We just wanted to bring you this nice little snippet of lost history, which we know you have enjoyed. Stay tuned for part 4 of our Elongated Skull series with Brian Forrester that is coming up just shortly. Just remember, guys, that the way by which we arrive at knowledge are hardly less wonderful than the discovery of these things themselves. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back. My second video is from Mystery History, and it is called Who Built Machu Picchu's Temple of Three Windows? This video has got wonderful images. It's a very interesting compilation. It must be one of the most beautiful places on Earth. There was a technology used that defy conventional means. The site sits at an elevation of 12,500 feet. Enjoy the video.
Machu Picchu, unquestionably one of the most recognizable ancient ruins on Earth. It is a place that is found high on countless astute explorers' bucket lists, and for good reason. Placed far away from modern civilization, requiring a 10-hour trek along the Inca Trail to reach. However, when one arrives at the site, they are rewarded with an astonishing array of ancient feats of engineering. There are many anomalous characteristics of this pre-Incan site, which, although ignored by academia, we intend to explore here on our channel. One of these peculiar and as yet unexplained features is the Temple of Three Windows. Located west of the main square, this sacred temple, formed with the use of gigantic megalithic blocks, is adorned with three still existing trapezoidal-shaped windows, aligned with the path of the sun, allowing its rays to pass through them at differing times of the day, brightly illuminating the sacred plaza beyond. It is one of the many inexplicable features of Machu Picchu, and indeed pre-Incan Peru, which laughs in the face of currently attested academic theory and its attempts to explain how such sites were initially built. Most funded archaeologists claim Machu Picchu was constructed as an estate for an Incan emperor known as Pachacuti between 1438 to 1472. However, we disagree with this claim due to the exquisite nature of the site's construction, the clearly advanced levels of architecture, specifically but not exclusively pertaining to its complex irrigation, sanitation, and drainage systems, and indeed the precision displayed with the use of such enormous multi-ton stones. These ancient megaliths were not only somehow carried to the tops of these mountaintop fortresses, but as the Temple of the Three Windows clearly displays, masterfully cut to form the windows, accomplishing such a refined finish to their surfaces that to claim they were chiseled out using primitive tools we find not to be a viable or indeed logical conjecture. It is clear to us that whoever created this remarkable temple had at their disposal not only advanced highly capable transport systems, but stone-cutting tools far out of the reach of the academically claimed constructors. Furthermore, present upon the stones of the Temple of Three Windows, also visible throughout ancient Peru, are enigmatic marks left by a tool that we, the public, are yet to be informed of. Intriguingly, these marks are not only visible upon the stones within Peru, but are also in abundance at the ancient quarry within Aswan. We have in the past covered the pink granite columns found within the ancient temples of Baalbek, transported from the same quarry to Baalbek, a distance of over 1,000 miles. These columns, we hypothesize, link the temple to the ancient pyramids, and these enigmatic stone-cut marks, present at Machu Picchu, we assert, connect all three. We believe that as more detailed alternative research is undertaken upon these sites, the connections between them, or more specifically, the true creators of said sites, will become apparent as the same. Both religious and evolution theories, in their current forms, stifle this truth by their very nature. Yet, thankfully, as more and more curious individuals relinquish themselves of the rigid and conformist chains of ideologies in favor of a pursuit of the truths of our Earth, the reality of history will inevitably be unraveled. Who built the Temple of Three Windows? How did they construct such an astonishing site built with such aligned precision with such enormous stones? It is undoubtedly highly compelling.
My next video is from the Lost History channel again, and it questions the royal bloodline of the Atlanteans. It's an excellent information about elongated skulls and the famous handbags of the gods. Enjoy this one.
So here's the deal, guys. Elongated skulls found in Paracas are not human. That has been confirmed through DNA testing. it doesn't match that of humans. So what the hell are they? Beings with huge heads are mentioned throughout historical texts and are depicted in many cultures across the planet, but they don't exist today. What happened to these supposed hierarchy of society? If scientific proof on this earth now exists of aliens or gods or whatever you want to call them is not enough, then you must seriously consider the consequences for dismissing such findings. Being skeptical is one thing, but completely dismissing this as a hoax has been more than enough to raise Mr. Spock's eyebrow right over his forehead. Wait till you hear this. When we think of Atlantis, we think of Plato's description. We don't have much else to go on, right? But what if we were to tell you that civilizations that we are taught about in schools like the Maya, the Egyptians, and the Aztecs, to name a few, all share a connection. One connection is the depiction of the handbag of the gods, which has got to be something of significant importance and appears in all these cultures, and it was so important they carved it in rock for all time. And the other connection is that in the elongated skulls, the rulers of these ancient cultures were the elongated skulls beings, meaning they are royal by blood and unmistakably visible to their people. For example, in the post-cataclysmic world, two groups of what we refer to as the pre-Adamites survived. One group in Europe and Asia, which become the dynastic Egyptians, and another one in Mesoamerica. Apparently these two groups were unaware of each other's survival. It is possible that these two surviving civilizations are the descendants of the Atlanteans. They ruled in ancient times after the cataclysm. It is possible they have gone on to further rule in certain circles. Consider the Illuminati, the New World Order. The symbolism for this is the all-seeing eye, the same symbol used by these ancient beings. This is the symbol for the royal bloodline of the Atlanteans. Is it possible that after the time of Columbus that these two surviving groups began communicating again and in turn set up the secret society to establish control over the world once again? The new empire of the Atlanteans may be the world we live in today. If elongated skulls people are still alive today, then perhaps they hide them by wearing a hat or a headscarf or something similar. In France, there have been burial sites found of the elongated skulls beings. This was a full 18-tomb royal dynasty, buried with all their jewels, and they all had elongated skulls. In Italy, even as recent as the 14th century, there is a royal family where they had countless family portraits that showed the prince and princess with huge elongated skulls. The family are called the House of d'Este, and they effectively have blood links to every European dynasty that have ever existed stretching back through time. But it is unclear how many of these beings are still present in society today. According to so-called whistleblowers, people with elongated skulls have been seen in places like London and New York, in the financial district, and indeed in the Vatican. The Pope's hat is another possible salute to these elongated beings. You have to wonder if these beings are in fact still controlling the planet in some capacity through finance and politics, and of course, religion. We often wonder why the ancient messages seem coded. We consider the great secrets that have been left for us to decipher. Well, perhaps these beings are safeguarding that secret and guiding us as a civilization from their own previous experience. Maybe, just maybe. The elongated skulls found at Antarctica were mind-blowing because not only had they found a lost civilization, but also because they did not match human DNA, meaning they could be alien in every sense of the word. It was thought at the time Antarctica was first reached by humans in 1820, hundreds of years after the suspected age of the skulls, but also because they were elongated with giant craniums, leading some commentators to claim they could have been the remains of aliens who visited Earth. The reports claim that an archaeologist called Damian Waters and his team uncovered the skulls in a region of Antarctica called La Paya. They were hailed initially as the first human remains uncovered from Antarctica before it changed to the first remains of aliens found on Earth. Mr. Waters, allegedly an archaeologist from Smithsonian Institute of New York, reportedly said after the alleged discovery in 2014, "We just can't believe it. We didn't just find human remains on Antarctica, we found elongated skulls. I have to pinch myself every time I wake up. I just can't believe it. They will redefine our view of mankind's history as a whole." The Greeks, the Anunnaki, the Egyptians, and many other civilizations may be the descendants of the Atlanteans, the survivors of the ancient cataclysm. If so, they could still be running this planet today and preparing us for an announcement. They have deliberately not told us of the past in an effort to rebuild what was once lost. When the Atlantean Empire is fully restored, then they will tell us who we are and what we are doing here. This seems as plausible as anything else. Guys, so why would this not be true? Anyway, comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.
There's still much to learn about the elongated skulls. My last video tonight is from Thunderbolt's project. It's called Upheaval: How Old is the Earth and its Species? I find this an interesting question. Earlier this year, scientists from New York and Sweden published the results of their sweeping study of 5 million DNA barcodes from about 100,000 different animal species. As reported by PhysOrg on May 28th in 2018, the results are sure to jostle, if not overturn, more than one settled idea about how evolution unfolds. In addition to a shocking absence of genetic diversity, the authors were stunned to conclude that about 9 out of 10 species on Earth appear to have come into being at about the same time, apparently sometime between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago. Study co-author David Thaler said of the findings, "This conclusion is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could." One unavoidable possibility these results raise is articulated in the PhysOrg report, which asks, was there some catastrophic event 200,000 years ago that nearly wiped the slate clean? Enjoy this video.
Welcome to Space News from the Electric Universe, brought to you by the Thunderbolts Project at thunderbolts.info. Planet Earth is home to an extraordinary diversity of species. Their current total numbers are estimated at around 10 million, including between 1 and 2 million animal species. However, scientists estimate that documenting all terrestrial species, if it could ever be achieved, could take as long as another 1,000 years. The consensus theory of the origins and evolution of life on Earth states that it all began 3.8 billion years ago, with single-celled organisms. Through an exhaustive study of the geological record, scientists have constructed a story of our planet's history and the life that inhabits it. But how reliable is this story? We have proposed a radically different origin and history of planet Earth, and indeed of our entire solar system. Planets do not form from accretion in gravitationally collapsing nebular clouds. Rather, the Electric Universe has proposed 2 forms of planetary formation: the ejection of rocky planets from the cores of gas giants, and planets forming from the electromagnetic Z-pinch effect along the same networks of filaments where stars are now known to form. The discovery of countless so-called baffling exoplanetary systems have further demonstrated the emphatic failure of the 2.5 centuries old nebular hypothesis. In our electric universe, the actual age of the Earth Our parent star and our solar system cannot be quantified based on our current understanding. Further complicating any attempts to assess our own planet's age is the overwhelming evidence for relatively recent global catastrophes, events that were recorded in the myths, folklore, and countless ancient and religious texts around the world. We have proposed that in an epoch of planetary instability in the inner solar system, powerful interplanetary lightning carved planetary surfaces, a hypothesis with an increasing body of scientific support, as our growing community of experimentalists have demonstrated. Countless familiar geological features are easily reproduced by electrical discharge to a solid surface. Of course, if these events did occur, both the geological and anthropological timelines of popular scientific theory must be reassessed. Indeed, in our electric universe, the entire question of evolutionary timetables must be reopened for further scientific investigation. And today, recent scientific reports have delivered a shocking blow to the standard theory of the evolution of life on Earth. Earlier this year, scientists from New York and Sweden published the results of a sweeping study of 5 million DNA barcodes from about 100,000 animal species. As reported by phys.org on May 28, 2018, the results are, quote, sure to jostle, if not overturn, more than one settled idea about how evolution unfolds. It is textbook biology, for example, that species with large, far-flung populations, think ants, rats, humans, will become more genetically diverse over time. But is that true? The answer is no, said Mark Steckel, lead author of the study, published in the journal Human Evolution. In addition to this surprising absence of genetic diversity, the authors were stunned to conclude that about 9 out of every 10 species on Earth appear to have come into being at about the same time, apparently sometime between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago. Study co-author David Thaler said of the findings, "This conclusion is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could." One unavoidable possibility that these results raise is articulated in the phys.org report, which asks, was there some catastrophic event 200,000 years ago that nearly wiped the slate clean? In part 1 of this 2-part presentation, Thunderbolt's colleague Peter Mungo Jupp begins a comprehensive and radical reassessment of the questions. How old is the Earth, and how has life unfolded upon it?
How old is the Earth and all its species? In 1650 AD, Bishop Ussher proposed that the world's age, gleaned from the biblical Genesis, was 6,000 years old. This relied on stated timelines from the book of Jasher. It was not until more recent times that new paradigms started to take hold. William Buckland, in the early 1800s, noted the part that catastrophic events had formed the geological landscape. However, Buckland's student Lyell broke away to form a radical new scenario. Drawing on the work of Hutton, he argued that the Earth was transformed not by unimaginable catastrophes, but by imperceptibly slow changes, many of which we can see around us today. For instance, rain erodes mountains while molten rock slowly pushes up to create new ones. The eroded sediments form into layers of rock which can later be lifted above sea level, tilted by the forces of the uprising rock, and eroded away again. These changes are tiny, but he reasoned with enough time they could produce vast changes. Both Hutton and Lyell therefore argued that the Earth was millions of years old. Time in the form of millions of years was the key to explaining the geological landscape. Uniformitarianism as a theory was thus born. The use of millions of years as an explanation of gradual change was seized on by Darwin, who envisaged evolution as a sort of biological uniformitarianism. Evolution took place from one generation to the next before our very eyes, he argued, but it worked too slowly for us to perceive. So out of this was born Darwin's prime theory, evolution by natural selection, or as we know it, survival of the fittest. Evolution arose from happy, slow, mutational changes that were either rejected or finally adopted and passed on to future generations of that species. However, the lack of intermittent adaptive species was and is a fundamental flaw to this time-driven theory. Nevertheless, this paradigm still seems to infect every area of modern geology and biology. It was only later that Alfred Wallace reformatted this theory and expounded a totally new concept. He formed the theory of evolution by intelligent design. Parts of the brain, for instance, were so complex that it seemed impossible to subscribe their formation to accidental development. There had to be a guiding force that designed and managed purposeful change. Both forms of evolution describe change through time, but only Wallace's intelligent evolution limits the power of natural selection to affect biological change. It suggests that in those areas of the biological world beyond the scope of natural selection's operations, some purposeful intelligence must be called upon to explain their existence. In contrast, Darwinian evolution claims that all biological life can be explained through a directionless process of survival of the fittest and random mutation. This fact has powerful implications for the age of life on Earth, as it doesn't necessarily rely on time as the arbiter of species change. Wallace's theory complements the late Stephen Gould's most significant contribution to evolutionary biology. This was the theory of punctuated equilibrium, which he developed in 1972. The theory proposes that most evolution is characterized by periods of evolutionary stability, which is infrequently punctuated by swift periods of branching speciation. This theory was contrasted against phyletic gradualism, the popular idea that evolutionary change is marked by a pattern of smooth and continuous change in the fossil record. Gould's theory lays the groundwork for the penetration of cataclysmic intervention into genetic reformulation of species and ceases the demands for long periods of time to explain the age of the Earth and its inhabitants. Now, how can we date the Earth's biology and geology? Proof of theories is very dicey, as too often they work towards a predefined finale. These outcomes can strongly bias scientific evidence. Often this is the case when one unproven dating methodology is used as evidence for the veracity of some new process. This is particularly true in the case of the mitochondrial DNA atomic clock phylogenetic studies, where we'll be aiming our main critique. But first I would like to summarise the more classic methods of dating in our clarification of Earth age. Now firstly we have classic mythology, historical facts and biblical sources, which themselves are quite often historic. They're often underestimated, but these can be very important sources of both relative, that's for parallel civilizational studies, and absolute dating of events. But as the historical Egyptian king lists show, they can be grossly incorrect, depending on the basis from which they are sourced. Velikovsky versus the world is but one controversial academic argument. Nevertheless, they do provide, in many cases, a broad brush to place historical events. For instance, whether it's the Trojan War, which circuits around 1000 BC, or Maya civilizations, we can glean some rough idea within at least 500 years timescale. But this is recent history. Beyond 6,000 years ago, we are beyond the scope of written history and have to essentially turn to modern scientific dating tools to support our work. Now let's first examine carbon dating. It's important to be aware of carbon dating fundamentals and their serious limitations beyond 6,000 years beyond the present time. Standardization procedures involving tree ring sequences has this limitation. Two of the basic assumptions on which radiometric dating are based are that the Earth is an isolated body in space, unaffected by interactions with other bodies, and that the decay constant is not variable. Again, the decay constant is not variable. No matter what, no matter where, the half-life of a particular radioactive isotope remains the same. Carbon dating not only varies with the amount of water to absorb it and thus decrease the amount available to the living organism, but would be susceptible to extraneous ratios from cosmic rays. Now at times, for instance, CMEs or coronal mass ejections from the sun does dramatically vary carbon-12 to carbon-14 isotope ratio, and for that matter, carbon-13 isotope ratios. Furthermore, even when absorbed by living organisms, that's to start the clock for carbon dating, there is no guarantee these ratios stay the same. For instance, bacteria can selectively differentiate carbon-13 from carbon-12 and perhaps take them out of the system. They can alter the isotope balance after death. This anomaly is aside from the fact that carbon-14 dates taken in isotopically chaotic times are necessarily heavily distorted. W.F. Libby, the inventor of carbon dating, clearly saw the limitations of the method and the conditions under which his theoretical figures would be valid. Libby understood the three reservoirs of radiocarbon on Earth: the atmosphere, the biosphere, and the hydrosphere. The hydrosphere, or oceans of seas, is the richest. The correctness of the method depends greatly on the condition that in the last 40 or 50,000 years, the quantity of water in the hydrosphere and carbon thus diluted in it has not substantially changed. The author Flood quotes from Chappell that the sea levels were low, for instance, around the Wallace Line, around Indonesia abutting the Pacific Ring of Fire, around 20,000 years ago. This low amount of water must then generally falsify results. Even the assumed 20,000-year-old figure is unreliable if based on erroneous paradigm. The method depends also on the condition that during the same period of time, the influx of cosmic rays or energy particles coming from the stars and the sun has not suffered substantial variations. There are a number of possible reasons for the variation in radiocarbon content of the atmosphere. Changes in the cosmic ray concentration due to the activity of the sun and galactic influences, and changes in the Earth's magnetic field which modulates proton concentration, which in turn affects the rate of production of carbon-14. And as Libby, the inventor of carbon dating, states, these conclusions, this is on the basis of carbon dating, could be false if errors in the very different quantities, the intensity of the cosmic rays and the mixing rate and depths of the oceans, should happen just to cancel one another. It should also be noted most of these specimens were heavily fossilized, and the effects of this process may have important connotations regarding contamination. They also reflect a dramatic environment at the time of death. Fossilization could also heavily influence the validity of the assumptions beyond, for instance, carbon dating. Now let's take an example. When characterising hominid WHL50 from the Willandra Lakes in Australia, the archaeologist Flood describes silica replacing the phosphate in that specimen's bones. Opalized is the term she uses, and this to her is proof of great antiquity, but is it? Similarly, cow swamps assemblage in Australia has been preserved by calcification, that's fossilisation in other words. This fossilisation of human remains has occurred without exception in all of the huge Australian linnets. Now remember, de Grazian notes, a fossil is typically an accident, a disaster, an anomaly. The problem with fossilisation is to stop the decay, and that means killing everything in the organism at once, including the bacteria. What dies is thus quickly recycled biotically unless some geological intervention occurs. It's quite possible the fossils found in these Australian lunettes were killed instantly and then petrified. Intervention that fossilise is almost always connected to the cause of death. I suspect an enormous electrical shock from the Lake Mungo magnetic reversal might do just that. In fact, as Wallace Thornall points out, a huge current flow must necessarily accompany a magnetic reversal. If that's the case, which it must be, then the Lake Mungo and Lake Victoria deposits in Australia might be the result of past catastrophic electrical interactions between the Earth and a cosmological event. Could this fact also signal a possible mutation driver? However, paramount is the fact that all of these remains are not necessarily Asian because they're fossilised. Secondly, as Gillespie, who dated much of the Willandra hominids, points out, the very nature of fossilising can skew the results of carbon dating. If the carbon is replaced or transmuted to silicon, ratios can easily be altered. From this contamination or selective bleaching of the carbon-14 isotope to height and age, his doubts are voiced in this quoted article. Have direct dating measurements on skeletal remains helped to resolve the Lake Mungo Willandra Lakes chronology? Should we believe the older dates, which always seem curiously more desirable to archaeologists, measured on base-soluble humic acid fractions, or the younger dates on insoluble residues? The unpalatable choice for both black sediment and burnt both dates seems to be between soluble or insoluble organic humic substances, both of which are of unknown composition and dubious origin. Now, the architect Webb argued for the older soluble humic acid dates on these burnt bones, on my advice at the time. I subsequently changed my view and supported the younger insoluble dates on the grounds that humic acids of whatever age are not likely to represent the burnt carbon we seek in charcoal or burnt bone. Not much of a choice, and neither may be the real age. The problem of the doubtful integrity of fossil carbon dates has also risen with Tom Loy's work at Australian National University. Using a technique of minute samples of blood from the bone carbon residues of human remains, ancient human remains, he is able to accurately date those samples. The reasoning is that blood, unlike other protein remains, is extremely robust and gives a distinct, clean reading compared to other protein samples. These are classically destroyed by many environmental actions, for instance bacteria. With these minute samples, he was able to date not only megafauna from Lake Eyre, South Australia, but samples of the WHL50 hominid from the Willandra Lakes. The mass spectrometer reading was 5,580 years before the present. This directly clashed with the expected chronology of 40 to 50,000 years that Alan Thorne, the chief archaeologist, expected. Thorne claimed contamination, but was it? More likely, the fossilised samples, as distinct from the relatively pristine blood, had been incorrectly assumed to be accurate. This is so often the case. Contamination is often cited when great discrepancies occur between expected dates and incongruent results.
This is part one of a two-part presentation. It is the beginning of a comprehensive and radical reassessment of the questions: how old is the Earth? How has life unfolded upon it? So with this, I conclude my presentation of videos tonight. Please write in, let me know what you think of my choice of themes I'm bringing up, what your opinion is. I would be very interested in hearing that. So let's start again with my introduction of work with your eyes, your mind, your memory. And again here as well, let me know what you think about it, what you have experienced while you were practicing, while you were joining in whatever I was presenting. Okay. All right. I just read in the chat that people were very interested in my choice of history of the world. So I will present more of it, definitely. Coming back to my vision work tonight, last time I gave some explanation about the importance of working with color when we do eye exercises. I want to continue the work with colors, and today we will be working with the color yellow. Yellow is about mental activity. It is the color that represents conscious mental thought. Yellow is also a happy, bright and uplifting color, a celebration of sunny days. Yellow aids the powers of discernment and discrimination, memory and clear thinking, decision-making and good judgment. It also helps good organization, assimilation of new ideas, and the ability to see different points of view. It builds self-confidence and encourages an optimistic attitude. So before we start with our exercise today, please remove your glasses and your contact lenses if you can, otherwise leave them in. So when you have removed your glasses, please take your time. Look around in your environment wherever you are, how it feels, what you can see, what your eyes are interested in when they look around. And focus your mind on the color yellow, whatever that represents to you. Get your hands warm by rubbing them together like I do. And then have your fingers crossed. Put your crossed fingers over the bridge of your nose, covering your eyes. Have your eyes closed, but with your hands don't squeeze your eyes, just loosely cover them. Make sure you're sitting comfortably wherever you are, and put your elbows either on a table or maybe on your knees so that your arms are not getting heavy and you stay in a comfortable position all the time. So with this image of yellow in your mind, listen to the story tonight. Let the yellow wave sing into your mind. It takes your intellect for a journey. You walk down a path paved with yellow bricks to a wall that stretches high to the right and to the left. The wall looks solid and impassable. You see writing on the wall in bright yellow paint. Letters that flow into words. The words tickle your mind as they did when you first learned to read. The words lead you to the right, gradually forming themselves into sentences. This wall is an illusion, you read. Thoughts are whatever you want them to be. Masters, servants, playmates, friends, or enemies. Thoughts come and go at your command. As you move along the wall, imagine touching it with your hand. You find the wall becoming softer. The hardness of it is gradually changing to a liquid consistency that your hand breaks through. With both hands now, push the wall aside and step through it with your whole body. Looking around you, you see several smiling ladies seated in classical poses. The first lady is dressed in saffron silk and a wreath of small golden flowers encircles her dark brown hair. She is holding a book that she extends to you. Taking up the book, you notice to your surprise that it weighs very little in spite of its large volume. It is covered with gold leaf and a single circle is inscribed on the front. Opening the book, you see geometric forms that appear to dance and move about like an old folk dance. What does this mean? You inquire of the woman. This book shows you the patterns of your thinking mind, she replies. The patterns that are basic to your mind are shown to you without specific content. By absorbing the images of this book, you will see that you are able to think clearly at all times. You will be able to connect and rearrange thoughts, picking and choosing the thoughts you wish to use to form and influence your life. Take the book with you. I wish you joy as you play with your intelligence. The lady then disappears. As to her companions, who will reappear upon your next visit into the yellow world. The atmosphere around you becomes suffused with a golden glow. Your mind is bathed in clear yellow, a thoughtless state that prepares you for a new return to thinking and communicating in your daily life. With this image of yellow in your mind, slowly come back into your body. Feel yourself sitting on the chair. Feel your feet on the ground. Slowly remove your hands from your face, but leave your eyes closed all the time. With your eyes closed, slowly let your nose draw a few circles into the air. Let the circle turn into the sun and draw a big yellow sun into the air. Now imagine you have got a magic paintbrush and paint the big circle bright yellow. Give it this really nice yellow sun color and paint it all in. Enjoy the brightness. Your eyes will love to bath in this kind of yellow. Leave your eyes closed, please, all the time. Now let your nose draw a triangle. Let this triangle turn into a beach hut and draw the beach hut. Now again put your magic paintbrush on the tip of your nose and give this beach hut the most beautiful yellow and paint the yellow all over your beach hut. Now let your nose draw a square. And let the square turn into a cube and draw the cube. And when you have done that, again put your magic paintbrush on the tip of your nose and paint the cube bright yellow. Paint it. Make sure you touch yellow all the spaces in your cube, all the sides. And when you have done it, then slowly open your eyes. Look around in your environment. See how it feels now. If you notice different things, if your eyes feel differently, if your body feels differently, if your mind even is more relaxed, just be aware of everything. And there was a question in the chat asking, what does it mean that the ladies in the story disappear? It is just that in the story you were given a book which represents, it's a symbolically speaking, represents your mind, which is made of thoughts, and thoughts are words that are represented in the book. And so the ladies leave you with this to think about and to stay with it. So that's why they disappear. And they leave you in this yellow world as long as you want to be, until you come back into your own reality. So please give me your comments on the eye work I'm doing, if you're enjoying it, what your thoughts are, what your questions are. And with this, I leave you for tonight and hopefully see you all again next week. Goodbye.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? or as an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness. My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just, sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Mira Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.